How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Ray Talks Hoop. Now, you might have noticed that I'm wearing my hat backwards today. And no, it's not because I'm trying to make a fashion statement or because I'm going to start wearing it like this from now on. It's actually because, in a way, it kind of symbolizes the Toronto Raptors. Right now, I feel like everything is going backwards for that franchise. Now, even though personally I am not a Raptors fan, I do have a lot of respect for the Raptors and their fans because of all the love and respect you guys have shown me on this channel. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this hat around, because hopefully this will be a symbol of things finally going the right way for the Toronto Raptors. Okay, that might have been the most corny thing I've ever done on camera, but what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Ray Talks Hoop. Let's go ahead and talk about everything going on with the Toronto Raptors. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, things are not going too well for them on the basketball court right now. But unfortunately, on top of all the madness that is currently happening with the Toronto Raptors on the basketball court, they are also having a couple issues off the court. Just recently, Coach Nick Nurse was fined $50,000 for ripping his mask off and throwing it behind the bench. Now, if you're asking me, I think that is way too much of a fine for just ripping your mask off, but that's not really my place to speak, so I'm not gonna say too much about that. Now, just yesterday, however, or early this morning, I'm starting to mix up days and everything, Pascal Siakam was also fined $50,000 for the way he spoke to Nick Nurse after yesterday's loss against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So not only are the Toronto Raptors losing game after game, they're being fined $50,000 left and right. But now let's go ahead and talk about yesterday's game against the Houston Rockets, because I'm not gonna lie, I was actually thinking the Raptors were gonna win. The Rockets had lost 20 games in a row, and heading into yesterday's game, the Raptors had lost 8 games in a row. So one way or the other, somebody's losing streak was going to end, and I really thought it was going to be the Raptors. Yesterday, the Raptors had Vanvleet, they had Norman Powell, they had Siakam, they had Kyle Lowry, and all of those guys played pretty well offensively. So because of that, I was pretty certain the Raptors were going to win the game, but it took me by surprise when they lost by almost 20 points. And no disrespect to the Houston Rockets, it's their job to go out and win basketball games. They haven't been doing too much of that lately, but no disrespect to the Rockets, they went out there, they played hard, they deserved that win. But goodness gracious, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes as Raptor fans. If my Lakers had lost 8 games in a row, and then we lost our 9th consecutive game to a team who had lost 20 games in a row, I probably wouldn't wear this hat for like 5 years. So with all of that being said, let's try to figure out why exactly the Raptors lost this game, and hopefully they can win their next one so they don't lose 10 games in a row. But before we go any further, if you guys wouldn't mind subscribing to the backup channel, the Ray Talks Hoop podcast. Long story short, we received a copyright strike on this channel, so if you appreciate unbiased NBA content, please just go ahead and subscribe to that channel. Anyway, here are the reasons why I think the Toronto Raptors lost. Normally, when the Raptors lose and I look at the scores, I see everything that happened during the game. A majority of the time, when the Raptors lose, one of the main reasons is because one of the main guys did not really do their job. For example, at the start of the season, Siakam was only scoring 8 to 10 points every single game and shooting 20 to 30% from the field. So yeah, it makes sense why the Raptors would have lost those games. But yesterday, for instance, let's just read off some of the stats. Norman Powell had 19, Siakam had 21 and 10, Vanvleet had 27 and 8, Kyle Lowry had 17, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds. So we can't really point our fingers at any of those guys, but if we look at the rest of the stats, nobody else really did anything. With the exception of those guys I just mentioned, the next highest scoring player was Paul Watson, and he only had 6 points. And then after him, it would be Chris Boucher with 4 points and 10 rebounds. And after Chris Boucher, nobody else scored the basketball. So essentially, it was the Toronto Raptors starting lineup versus the Houston Rockets entire team. And the bench a basketball team has is actually very important, probably more important than your starters if you think about it. When the Golden State Warriors were a very good basketball team, what was their saying? Strength in numbers. And it wasn't because Steph Curry was the greatest basketball player in the world at the time. It wasn't because of Clay or any of those guys. It was because those guys on the bench could compete with pretty much any team starters. The Warriors coaching staff had a rotation that no matter who was on the court, somehow, some way, they were still going to be effective and get the job done. And I know the Raptor fans can relate to that because having a good bench is the primary reason why the Raptors are always a pretty good team. The Raptors would not have made it that far into the playoffs last year if they did not have a good bench. They lost Kawhi Leonard after winning the championship in 2019. Kawhi Leonard was great in being able to get the Raptors over the edge of not being able to win a championship, but the real support from that team comes from the bench and the defense. Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and all of those guys are great basketball players, but like we just saw in yesterday's game, if the bench isn't going to do what they need to do, they're not going to win very many basketball games. And then the final reason, in my opinion, as to why the Raptors lost yesterday's game had to do with poor defense. The Rockets shot nearly 40% from three, and it would be a different story if the Raptors were contesting these shots and somehow, some way they were still falling. But that wasn't the case. A lot of the shots the Rockets were making yesterday were wide open threes. So when you're giving up that many wide open threes and the other team is shooting nearly 40% from three, chances are you're going to lose the game. Give this video a thumbs up if you watched it all the way through and hit that subscribe button down below. Also, go ahead and subscribe to the Ray Talks Hoop podcast once again. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow. I am out of here.